A millionaire yelled at a waitress. Then she said just one thing, and shocking silence fell. In a luxurious restaurant, waitress Veronica came face to face with billionaire Carson Hale, a powerful, rude man used to being untouchable. But when he publicly humiliated her, she didn't retreat. She didn't insult him, didn't argue. She simply answered, calmly, directly, humanely. Before we begin the story, leave a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from today. If someone had known how things would unfold after that phrase, maybe the room would have gone quiet even before Carson Hale opened his mouth. But the evening began like hundreds of others, and no one knew that today, someone would stop being feared. It had been raining for hours. The downpour hadn't stopped for a moment, drumming on the car roof, umbrellas, windows. The restaurant, Elysian Table, a place where lobster was served before water, was packed. Outside, cars with tinted windows were lined up, and inside, the coatroom smelled of expensive perfume and damp leather. Veronica stood at the counter, double-checking an order for a table by the window. 3 men sat there. In the center was a man with sharp cheekbones, silver in his hair, and a face known across the country. Carson Hale, media magnate, owner of the largest TV network and dozens of magazines. They said he once fired someone for coughing during a live broadcast. Waitstaff usually avoided his table, twice if they were smart. He placed his order quickly, without looking at Veronica. He skimmed the menu like it was a stack of financial documents, then tossed it on the table. Medium rare steak, no sides. Red wine, French. Better not speak if you don't know the difference, he said, eyes already on his phone. Veronica nodded. She always nodded, no need for words. Her notebook was neat, her steps swift and silent. In 3 years at Elysian Table, she'd seen it all. People who began their night smiling and ended it in tears. Men who ordered fine dishes but forgot their wives' names. Women who cried in the restroom before returning to their seat. She brought the order in 20 minutes. The steak was done right. Sauce on the side. Wine at room temperature. Veronica approached the table, placed the plate without interrupting the conversation. Hale didn't look up. He cut a piece, chewed, then suddenly lifted his head. You brought me a medium steak, he said. When I clearly asked for medium rare. This isn't just a mistake, it's an insult. This isn't dinner, it's a slap in the face. The room fell silent. Even the background music seemed quieter. Nearby tables went still. All eyes turned toward them. What would she say? Usually, servers apologized, promised to fix it, rushed away, and tried not to be seen again. But Veronica didn't apologize. Not right away. She looked straight at Hale, silent just long enough for the quiet to become heavy. I'm sorry, she said at last calmly. I'll double-check with the kitchen to see if there was a mistake. But if I may, she leaned in slightly, we all make mistakes. I try to treat everyone with respect, whether they're holding a sandwich or a lobster. And you could do the same. Her words were gentle, no challenge, no force. She wasn't arguing. She was reminding. Hale froze. He seemed about to speak, but didn't. His lips twitched. He looked at her like a puzzle missing a piece. Then he stood up, not looking at his guests, the room, or the waitress, and walked out. Didn't wait for the second course. Didn't pay. Once he disappeared behind the glass doors, the restaurant fell into a special kind of silence. The kind that comes not from fear, but from astonishment. People exchanged glances but said nothing. No one knew what to make of it. One of Hale's companions whispered, "You've lost your mind, girl." But Veronica didn't respond. She cleared the plate and went to the kitchen. Inside it was warm, filled with the scent of meat, cream, and oregano. "Everything okay?" the chef asked. "Yes," she said, picking up the order for table 8. That night, she went to bed later than usual. No new messages on her phone. Rain tapping the windows. She kept thinking of Hale's expression, and felt no fear. Just a strange, heavy silence inside. She didn't know that, at that same moment, in a penthouse across the city, Carson Hale sat by a massive window with a glass of wine, thinking not of the wine, not of the steak, but of a moment years ago when someone threw coins on the floor and he bent down to pick them up without lifting his eyes. Carson wasn't sleeping, not because he was angry. It was more complicated. For the first time in years, someone had told him the truth, and didn't apologize for it. He wasn't used to that feeling. Couldn't name it. It burned inside him. Kept him from sleeping. Kept him from thinking. Wouldn't let him forget. The next morning, he canceled his investor meeting, one he'd prepared for all week. Told his secretary he felt unwell. But what he truly felt was something entirely different. Something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Shame. He poured himself a strong coffee and sat by the floor-to-ceiling window. The city was waking up. Cars moved steadily. Streets gleamed after the rain. People hurried in every direction. He watched it all, but saw none of it. In his mind there was only one image. Veronica. A strange name. Plain. Unremarkable. But it stuck. That was rare. Usually, people were just functions to him. Habits, predictable responses. But she was different. He remembered that night as if he were watching someone else's movie. The scene at the restaurant. Her voice, quiet, steady, unusual. No fear. No defiance. Just clarity. Strange. Unfamiliar. Wrong, almost, but powerful. And something inside him shifted, like an old machine creaking back to life. He stood, went to the safe, opened it. Inside was an old box. Letters. Photos. A notebook. And one item from long ago. A waiter's badge. With his name, Carson. Back then, he was 16. He worked at a cheap diner on the edge of town. His father died 2 years earlier. His mother was barely holding on. He needed to help. He carried trays, took out the trash, wiped tables, endured insult. He especially remembered one incident. An elderly woman threw some coins on the floor at him. "But the tea, boy," she said without even looking. He bent down and picked them up, not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't not pick them up. He needed that money. Then he promised himself, one day, he will become someone who people dare not say no to. He kept that promise. More than 20 years passed, and now a waitress in a fancy restaurant looks him in the eye and tells him he can be human. Carson poured himself another coffee, black and unsweetened like at that cafe. He felt something stirring inside him. The memory became the key. He didn't want to think about it, but now he couldn't not think about it. He called his assistant. "Find me the name of the waitress who served me yesterday." "Which restaurant?" "Elysian Table." Everything was bad, no, everything was right. The assistant was silent but then said, "I know." Carson ended the call, sat back, and looked out the window. The world hadn't changed, but he had started to. That same evening he received a file. The name was Veronica Dmitrieva, 25 years old. At the restaurant for 3 years without complaints. Lives in a rented apartment in the southwest of the city. No parents. She studied but did not finish. Had to work. Carson read these lines and thought again about himself. 16 years old. Father's death. A mother who lacked medicine. Work, resentment, a promise to rise above all. And now a woman who possessed nothing but her own dignity reminded him who he was, who he could have remained. He stared at the screen for a long time, then opened another document, a bank document. He made a transfer of $50,000 without explanation, no sender's name, only his signature, Carson Hale. He didn't know if she would accept it, but it didn't matter. It wasn't compensation or ransom. It was a gesture, an act, a first step toward becoming himself again. Meanwhile, Veronica stood at the counter as usual. Her shift was ending. It had been a hard day. The coffee machine was broken since morning. Then someone spilled wine on the tablecloth. A client at table 8 behaved like a child. She was tired. Then the manager approached her holding a white envelope. It looked official. For you, only your name, no instructions. Veronica took it and opened it. Inside was a check for 50,000. No words, only Carson Hale's signature. Her heart started beating faster. It wasn't fear, joy, or anger. It was something she couldn't name. Her eyes froze on the numbers. It was more than she earned in a year. She immediately thought, does he really think he can pay for my silence? She sat down in the kitchen. The envelope lay before her next to a cup of cheap tea. She didn't know what to do. To accept meant to agree. To refuse meant to reject not money but a gesture. But she didn't know where it started or what his signature was worth. That night she didn't sleep much. The money lay in her drawer. She couldn't make herself spend it or even imagine what for, as if it wasn't money but a question she still had to answer. Things can be evaluated, actions understood. But how to deal with a silent gift from a person used to ordering others? And can you believe that he truly wants to change? Veronica held the envelope in her hands for the third night in a row. It lay on the edge of the table like a challenge. She looked at it as a stranger's letter, one you can't open but can't leave unopened. At work, she didn't talk about it. And with whom? She had few friends. School friends had long left. Those who stayed lived different lives, with children, mortgages, neighbors on the stairwell. She had books, a studio apartment, and long shift. The manager who gave her the envelope said nothing but looked curious. Rumors started spreading in the restaurant. Someone whispered that Hale bought her, others said she saved his life and he repaid her in this way. Veronica was silent. She simply didn't know what to think. A week after the incident, she was working by the window again. Light, dry, almost invisible snow was falling. There were fewer guests than usual. The weather kept those who wanted to shine away. She was serving table 8 when one of the junior waiters quietly approached her. "Someone is asking for you at the entrance." "Who?" He didn't say. Just an adult without a coat, standing as if unsure to enter or leave. Veronica wiped her hands, fixed her apron, and went to the cloakroom. From 3 steps away she recognized him. Carson Hale, without security, without companions, without a haughty mask on his face. He looked at her and suddenly, for the first time, looked away. "Can you spare me a minute?" She nodded. He gestured to an empty waiting area by the window. They sat down. He didn't start immediately. Paused as if choosing words. "I'm used to being the boss," he finally said. "I'm used to silence or agreement, even when I'm wrong. Especially when I'm wrong." Veronica was silent. He continued, "But that night you didn't argue, shout, or fight. You just reminded me that I am a person and you are an equal person. And I realized I had become someone I would have despised in my youth." She listened without interrupting. It was not a confession, it was a recognition from someone who found the courage to speak when it's too late to speak but still necessary. He took from his inner pocket a second envelope, unlike the first, thicker, and placed it on the table. "I sent you a check," he said. "Not as payment, not as a gift, but as a reaction." Then he realized it wasn't that, not everything. "And I came to explain." She took the envelope and opened it. There was no money inside, only a letter and an attached document, an invitation with an offer to become the executive director of a foundation created under his media group. The foundation's goal was to support women facing difficult life circumstances, loneliness, violence, social pressure. The foundation was called Veronica's Voice. She looked up and didn't immediately understand what to say. It was as if he had read her thoughts. "I want this foundation to be led not by a politician, nor a media figure, nor someone who knows how to speak beautifully, but by someone who knows how to speak simply when everyone else is silent." She felt everything inside her mix: confusion, anxiety, something like pride. But the loudest feeling was doubt. "Why did you choose me?" she finally asked. I am nobody. I didn't even finish college. You have others with experience." When everyone fell silent in that hall, you spoke not to win, but to remind. "And I want your voice to be heard beyond that hall." She didn't answer right away, just put the letter back in the envelope, then looked at him. I need time to think. He nodded, didn't insist, stood up again, looked at her but now without the old sharpness. There was something new in his gaze, not softness, but respect. I'll leave my contacts. Think as long as you need. He left quietly, without pomp, but now he spoke to her not arrogantly but humanly. That night Veronica again couldn't sleep for a long time. The phrase, foundation director, sounded like it came from another world. She couldn't even imagine how it was possible. But deep inside she knew. After that evening, after that meeting, she could no longer be just a waitress as if nothing had happened. She took an old notebook from the drawer. Once, as a child, she wrote her dreams there, to study, to help, to do something real. Then life changed, but the notebook remained, and the lines in it too. Now she read them and understood. Maybe someone had just opened the door again to that very life she once dreamed of. There are decisions made in one moment, and there are those that take everything: nerves, fear, the past. Yet the morning comes when a person puts on different clothes and takes the first step. A week after the conversation with Carson Hale, Veronica submitted her resignation. The restaurant was stunned. The chef frowned. The manager exchanged glances with the accountant. Everyone thought it was because of the scandal. She didn't explain anything, just signed the papers, returned the uniform, and walked through the dining room. For the last time, she left 3 years of her life in that room and one phrase that changed her fate. The Veronica's Voice Foundation was located downtown, on the 7th floor of a large glass building. Not in a tower, but not in the basement either. Modest, bright. On the door was a plaque she only saw on the day of her first visit. Under her name was written, Executive Director. Veronica clenched the strap of her bag and entered. Inside were 3 offices, a common hall, a project board. Several young women discussed something over laptop. One of them, Marina, approached and extended her hand. Welcome. We've been waiting for you. Since then, everything changed and began with studying. Carson insisted. Before leading the foundation, she had to take a course on nonprofit management. It was 2 months of immersion, lectures, case studies, group work, meetings with supervisors. At first, she felt like an outsider. Everyone else had experience, spoke in terms, knew the abbreviations. She stayed silent, took notes, read at night. The time of waitressing shifts changed to a schedule of study blocks and analytical assignments. Sometimes she wanted to quit, but then she remembered that evening, not because she wanted to repeat it, but because it reminded her, her voice mattered. After 2 months, she returned to the foundation's office already as someone who knew what she was doing. She gathered a team and said, "We will have 3 directions. First, emergency psychological help for women who survived violence. Second, courses on financial literacy and employment. Third, help for single mothers, food, housing, support." Marina nodded. 2 others, a young lawyer and a psychologist, took note. Someone asked, "Where do we start?" Veronica answered without pause, "With those who don't have time to wait." They started with a shelter, negotiated with volunteers, searched for premises, collected things, then connected free lawyers. The first calls, the first women, the first stories appeared. Veronica listened and recognized herself in them, not literally, but in the fear, confusion, and loneliness. She knew what it was like when you feel no one will hear you. And now she could become the one who hears. One day, a girl about 20 knocked on her office door. Dark-haired, wearing a jacket too big, holding a bag, eyes empty. "They told me they help here." "Sit down," Veronica said calmly. It was Daria. She lived with a boyfriend who drank, then hit her, then kicked her out. She had no one. No job, documents almost expired. No food, no housing. Veronica listened, wrote down, called a lawyer, psychologist, volunteers. By evening, Daria was already in the shelter. In 3 days, she had new documents. In a week, a place in free courses. In a month, her first job at a confectionery. Later, Daria admitted, I came here because you don't look like an official. You listened. It was as if I was a person again. Veronica was silent for a long time after those words, then went out into the corridor and locked herself in the break room. She sat on a chair. For the first time in a long while, she cried, not from pain, but because it was all real. A month later, the foundation was invited to a press conference. Journalists, partners, and city officials gathered. The room was noisy with camera flashes. Carson sat aside in a suit, without security or assistant. He did not take the stage. Veronica took the stage. Reporters pressed her. Why her? Not a major specialist? Why was the foundation named after her? She looked out at the crowd like she once looked at Carson and said, because in that room, when everyone was silent, I spoke. A simple phrase, but the room fell silent. Later, Carson spoke briefly. People say power corrupts. That's true. But sometimes, very rarely, one honest voice can restore your faith. That same night, Veronica sat by the window. The city buzzed outside. Her inbox was full of messages from women saying, "You gave me hope." She closed her laptop, took out an old notebook, and on the last page wrote, "Today I realized I didn't change the world. I just made it quieter so someone else could speak." Sometimes things end with applause, sometimes with silence, and sometimes with a simple phrase a person says to themselves in the morning mirror and finally recognizes who they are. 6 months passed. The Veronica's Voice Foundation was already working in 3 areas, just as she planned. There was a shelter with 20 places, weekly courses, a hotline, and the team grew. Volunteers from universities, doctors, lawyers, and IT specialists who built a website for free joined. Several companies provided regular donations. Every morning started the same. Tea in the kitchen, a queue for calls, report checks. Children's laughter echoed in the halls. Women with children came to the shelter. Sometimes it was hard. Sometimes it felt like there wasn't enough strength. But when Veronica heard whispered thanks, it was enough to keep going. Journalists kept writing. Headlines varied. How one waitress changed a media mogul, a voice no one expected, the power of silent courage. Some articles were dramatic. She didn't like those. Some were kind, one was precise. It said, Veronica didn't save anyone, she simply didn't turn away. She was asked to speak and give interviews but refused. There were too many words and too few actions. She chose the latter. Still, once she had to go on stage. A city social policy conference invited officials, business people, and public organizations. Veronica first said no, but Carson insisted. Not for PR, he said, but for those who will listen. Your voice is needed, not by me, but by them. She agreed. No cameras, no banners, just a live speech. About 100 people were in the room. She sat in the front row with a folder containing a speech written the night before, dry and clear. When her name was announced, she left the folder on the chair, took the microphone, looked at the crowd, and spoke. When I worked as a waitress, I had many chances to stay silent, to agree, to smile even when shouted at. That's not weakness, it's survival. But one day I realized, if I stay silent again, I will stop being myself. She paused, then continued. Power is not just money. Power is the ability to speak when others cannot. That evening at the restaurant, I simply reminded that behind the steak and the suit is a person, no more, no less. The room listened quietly, no rustling, no phones. Even officials didn't interrupt. Today I stand here not because of a diploma or connections, but because one strong, influential person heard me instead of ordering me around. That rarely happens, but it's enough to change someone's life. Pause. Some applauded. The rest just sat, listened, and absorbed. She finished. I don't want to be called a hero. I want there to be more voices like mine. Because in a world where too many speak, true strength is in those who know how to speak when everyone else is silent. After the speech, women approached. Students, mothers, social workers. They spoke quietly, lips pressed tight, as if afraid to be interrupted. They thanked her, shared their stories, asked how to help. Later, Carson came up. He looked different, calm, relaxed, no condescension. "You were real," he said. "Do they feel it?" "They always do," Veronica nodded, smiled, then suddenly asked, "Do you regret leaving back then?" He looked at her. "For long?" "No," he replied, "because if I had stayed, everything would have been different. I would have apologized out of politeness, tipped, and stayed the same. But you gave me the chance to become different. Not that night, later, but thanks to you." 2 months later, the foundation received an award. The money was used to open a second shelter. Daria, the girl with the jacket, now led a support group, helping others as she once was helped. A youth club formed. A psychologist held sessions for women afraid to start relationships after abuse. Life went on. One early morning, Veronica got up as usual, made tea, and looked out the window. The city was waking up just like that rainy night, and her heart buzzed with tension. Now there was silence. She approached the mirror, looked at her reflection, calm face, tired eyes, steady gaze, and for the first time in a long time, recognized herself.